Right now, AI is transforming how podcasters grow and make money from their shows. However, most podcasters are using AI the wrong way, only tapping into 60% of its potential. And it's either because they're completely overwhelmed with the conflicting advice out there, or they are completely unaware about how to use AI the right way to drive real growth and revenue for their business. And as a result, they stay stuck with bland, generic strategies that doesn't give them an edge compared to everyone else. In the last 9 months, I've worked with 100 plus podcasters one-on-one and have found 4 impactful ways to use AI to move the needle so that you can create better content, reach more listeners, and monetize your podcast way faster without wasting time on things that simply don't matter. And that's exactly what I want to share with you in this video today. Tip number 1, use AI and your podcast analytics to create future content that drives faster growth for your podcast. Here's the thing, right? Most podcasters are flying completely blind. They cross their fingers, hit publish, and hope that something sticks. They invite high-profile guests on in hopes that that high-profile guest will bring them a new audience, which oftentimes never actually comes. Hope simply isn't a strategy if you're trying to grow and monetize your podcast as fast as possible. And if you're just guessing without a clear strategy of why that's going to drive more growth for your podcast, and without a way of tracking what's working and what's not, you'll end up creating content for months and years to be still stuck with slow and steady growth. Now here's a real problem. Most podcasters use AI in a generic way. They go to ChatGPT, Grok, Claude AI, doesn't matter which one it is, whatever platform you use, they go onto there and they just get random episode ideas. But the issue is, when you go to ChatGPT or whatever AI platform you use, and you just say, hey, suggest episode titles for my podcast, you're essentially going based off of randomness, based off of what the AI wants to give you, not based off of what's currently performing for your listeners, what topics your audience actually loves based on specific data of your show. And so many podcasters are sitting on a goldmine of data, a goldmine of their analytics that tells them what episodes they've published that listeners love, enjoy, and want to hear more of. However, most podcasters don't really know how to use the data in a productive way. Most podcasters are totally intimidated and scared of their podcast analytics, but are totally obsessed with their downloads. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm obsessed with monthly downloads. I love seeing numbers go up to the right-hand corner. There's nothing wrong with that. However, it's important to know that your analytics isn't just to look at your monthly downloads. It gives you data on what your best performing episodes are, and based on that data, you can make better data-driven decisions moving forward. But the question is, how do we actually do that? And how can AI make your life easier when it comes to using your analytics in a productive way that drives more growth and monetization for your podcast? So here's how it works. Step number 1, go to your hosting platform and pinpoint your top 3 most popular episodes in the last 90 days. This will give you a clear insight again on your best performing episodes, and you want to do this over the span of the last 90 days. Step number 2, feed AI the top episode transcripts and ask it to generate alternative episode titles that are more engaging, that are curiosity driven, and that are proven to work. The importance of this is you're getting the AI to literally consume the content of the best performing episodes that you have created that's proven and has been shown that your audience actually loves. And you want to then give it this prompt. You want the ideas to be based on unanswered questions within the episodes your audience might have. And you want it to give you unique angles to explore in the episode. So again, in future episodes, what are the unanswered questions that were left unanswered, loops that won't close within the top performing episodes? Little tangents might go on, or questions your audience might have. And again, I'm going to show you an example of what this looks like in just a moment. And what this will do, it will give you different podcast episode ideas, future content ideas based on what's proven to work. So now you're no longer guessing and hoping that something will take off. You know categorically what will work and what won't. And step number 3, record and publish the new AI suggested follow-up episodes that build on what your audience already loves. Now imagine what that could do for you and how much faster you could grow your podcast if you started creating content based on what's proven to work. Now here's an example. I gave it one of our episodes that performed super well. The title was A Lazy Principle That Will Help You Grow Your Podcast Way Faster. Not bad, right? Now, for context, within this episode, the main things that I was covering was essentially talking about how my brother went through an experience where he was trying really hard, posting on social media, creating a bunch of content, going super hard, publishing every single day, but he didn't have a lazy strategy that most people use. He was trying to create original content, but he needed to create content that was based on demand. He needed to look at what content is out there that's already performing in my social media space. For him, that was health and fitness. And I share the story about how he leveled up his content game once he started copying what was already performing and adding his own unique twist. Now, that's the context behind this episode. Instead of trying to just create original ideas, just look at what's already performing and then add your own spin. Now, here's some alternative titles which are pretty good. Why your podcast isn't growing and the backward strategy that fixes it in 90 days. The viral growth shortcut, how to explode your podcast without more effort. And the third idea it gave was the secret to making your podcast blow up that no one is talking about. I then asked AI to give me, hey, look, what are some unanswered questions? Because it was a short episode, about 9 to 10 minute long. And I just asked, hey, look, what are some unanswered questions? What are some open loops that are left open that I can create future content? What should the focus be of these episode titles you've gave me? And this is what I gave, right? So question number 1, are you stuck in a slow lane of podcast growth? And the question that was left on our listeners' mind, you can see there, is what's the difference and how can I start capturing attention instead? Now, in the episode, I mentioned how for my brother, the unlock was capturing attention instead, but I didn't go into detail of how to do that. So that's a question my audience would have that I can make an episode on. The next one, how to find the right trends for my niche and make them work for my... This is a question that my audience would have. Because if I'm saying, hey, look, rather than just trying to create original ideas, go out there, find what's working, and then add your own unique spin on it, they're probably thinking, that makes total sense, but how the hell do I go about and find those trending topics? And finally, a question that's on my audience's mind would be, am I wasting time on the wrong things instead of doing what actually works? So I can make an episode talking about how to know if you're working on the right strategy that will drive more growth for your podcast. The angles that I'm taking aren't based on guesswork. They are filling the gaps in my content, filling and adding to my best performing episodes, not just me guessing. Think about what this would look like for you. Tip number 2, use AI to write show notes that actually convert and drive more listeners for your podcast. Your show notes should be seen as a sales agent for your podcast episode, where the entire goal is to convince a total stranger who's never heard of you before to click play and listen to the podcast, and to convince your current listeners and give them a reason to stick around and click play to future episodes. But most podcasters don't realize this, so they use their show notes and use generic AI to create bland, boring summaries that are super generic and focus on the wrong things. Random timestamps, generic information and stories about the guests that haven't onto their podcast, or insights that broadly cover what was talked about on the show. Now, if you think about it, you have your episode title, which grabs someone's attention. Then you have your show notes, where a portion of potential listeners will go to in order to read a bit more about your actual episode. Now, if this is brand generic and doesn't speak directly to their needs, what's the likelihood they click play and listen to your episode? However, if you know that portion of your ideal listeners and clients will go to your show notes to find more before they ever click play, how important do you think it will be to optimize this area and improve it to act again as a sales agent to convert the stranger into a listener? So look, here's how to do this the right way and how to get AI to turn your podcast show notes into a 24/7 sales agent for your podcast. Here's how it works. Step number 1, you simply feed your podcast transcript into AI. Now, for us, we use ChatGPT. For you, you can use Claude. Step number 2, ask AI to write it into show notes using the ADA framework. And you want to use attention, a compelling hook that grabs interest. Interest, a short, benefit-driven summary of the episode. Desire, a sneak peek into 3 juicy insights from the episode. And then action, a clear call to action to book a call, download the freebie, join the email list. But really, if you're using this specifically for your podcast show notes, it should be to listen to the podcast episode right now. Now, I'm going to get into why I added that final part of book a call, download freebie, email list in just a moment. But it's important to know that if it's for your podcast episode, the call to action should specifically be to listen to the podcast. Now, it's important to note that you need to give it some context and let it know that every single one of the points all should be highly targeted based on relevancy for my target audience's needs, shameful desires, worries, and anxiety. It will make sure that every single one of those steps, attention, interest, desire, action, every single one is going to be hyper targeted to your specific audience based on them, their needs, and relevancy to what they want. That's how you position your podcast episode as the best thing for them. Now, finally, when you have your show notes, because like I mentioned, it really is a sales agent for your podcast. You can use this within your newsletter when you want to promote the episode. You can add this to your website to drive people to the podcast. So you can add it to your YouTube show description if you have a video podcast as well. And you can make it as a LinkedIn post that drives more engagement for your podcast episode. Once again, the show notes isn't just this place where you post stuff and you set and forget it and that's that. It's really understanding the fundamental of my show notes as a sales agent. Its entire goal is to turn more strangers into active listeners for my podcast, to drive them to take action and press play on my episode. Tip number 3, turn your podcast content into a book that sells organically on Amazon and that you can sell to your listeners as a low ticket product. Podcasters spend years creating incredibly valuable content, but most never think to turn it into a book. Or maybe you have, but don't know the specific steps you can take to make that into a reality. Meanwhile, authorities across all different industries are using books to build their credibility and authority, to attract dream clients to their business, and to create an additional passive income source. Now, I know this because I've published multiple best-selling books under the pen name of Daniel Larson. I've sold tens of thousands of copies and generated multiple six figures from my own publishing business, which I eventually went on to sell. So I know books are a huge opportunity when it comes to driving more revenue and client acquisition for your business. Now, back in the day, before AI was a thing, I'll be honest, writing a book would be long, would be time consuming, would be frustrating. We'll probably have to spend tens of thousands of dollars just in creating the actual book itself, in getting an editor, in hiring the right team, in getting a publisher, and all of these different aspects. But here we are, in 2025, that's no longer an issue. Publishing a book doesn't need to be time consuming, expensive, and you don't need an entire marketing team to do that. You simply need valuable podcast content, and within that, you can create a high value book that sells on Amazon and that you can sell to your audience. It's important to note that if you have a podcast that's topic focused, meaning you're covering a very specific topic, it can be basically essentially educational content. If you're an expert and entrepreneur, likelihood is you're creating again educational content. And because you have a podcast, you're in a very unique situation where you're creating incredible content every single week. You're probably interviewing incredible guests, or you're doing solo episodes that are jam-packed with value, which means that you have a bunch of content that has the potential of creating a high-value book that makes you money. But if you don't use it, then it's just collecting dust. And you have this body of content, 50, 100, 200, 300, maybe 500 episodes that you're not utilizing. People like Tim Ferriss have turned their podcast content into a book, or Stephen Bartlett with his book, The Diary of a CEO. So the question becomes, how can you do the same? And how can you leverage AI the right way to turn your podcast content into a book that sells both on Amazon and that you can sell to your listeners? Here's how to do it. Step number 1, use AI to transcribe your podcast episodes. Step 2, feed your transcripts into AI and ask it to structure them into book chapters. Step number 3, use AI to rewrite, refine, and format your content into a book-worthy manuscript. And finally, upload it onto Amazon KDP. KDP simply stands for Kindle Direct Publishing. It allows you to publish your books as an independent publisher. So you don't need, a massive budget. You don't need to spend tons of marketing. You don't need to go to a professional publisher. You can simply publish the book yourself under your brand name, your podcast name, or your author name, which is just yourself. And once you do that, you can now offer your audience a low ticket product that they can buy. And if they're a podcast listener of your show, a book that distills the knowledge you've been sharing on your podcast episodes. Again, that's super highly valuable and an easy way to add an additional income source to your podcast. So look, you might be thinking, well, what does this practically look like? So let's say, for example, you have a podcast and you have 20 plus podcast episodes all about scaling your coaching business. AI can then use that content, whether that's you interviewing guests, or whether that's you talking about it on your podcast episode, and create a book idea called The Six-Figure Coach Playbook: How to Attract Clients and Scale Your Business Without Burnout. Again, this is just an example for you, depending on what niche, what industry you're in. The suggestion for the book title and angle will be totally different. Now, it's important to know that now every podcast listener has an extra way to engage with you. and your book becomes, again, a client generating asset for your business. So it's not just that you put the book on Amazon and you sell the book to your audience, but when people on Amazon or your audience or your podcast listenership buy the book, read the book, you're going to have specific calls to action within the actual book itself to book in a call with you, to explore working with you, to explore how your service might be able to help them, how your coaching might be able to help them get the desired result. And if they listen to your podcast, buying the book, consume the content, and you have a back-end offer that's high ticket, you can see how there's a clear line between your book and you generating not just money on the front end with a book sale, but on the back end by turning that listener into a reader, into an actual paying client. Tip number 4, use AI to write high converting emails that sells your offer to your podcast audience. Building an email list is something that's so important when it comes to monetizing your podcast. And if you're not emailing your podcast listenership every single week, every other day, or even daily, you're leaving so much money on the table. As experts, entrepreneurs of podcasts, if you have a high ticket coaching offer, oftentimes a lot of your audience won't be ready to buy after listening to a podcast episode. They might not be in a position where they want to book a sales call. But when you have an email list and you can reach out to them once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, every single day, and you send them highly valuable emails that grabs their attention, shares an insightful story, provides additional value, you're then able to catch them at the right time and then the right state of mind to then explore potentially wanting to work with you. When you don't email them on a regular basis, how are you going to keep top of mind? How are you going to build a deeper connection with your audience? And how are you going to sell them at the point when they're actually ready to buy? Because oftentimes it won't be right then after a podcast episode. So if you're not capturing their attention when they are ready, you miss out on so many sales opportunities. Now look, let's be honest, the idea of writing an email every single week can be quite frustrating, especially because most podcasters, like it is, you're not a copywriter. So it can feel very time consuming. Like when I say, writing a daily email, I personally don't write daily emails. I write emails to my list 3 to 4 times per week. So the point is, you probably don't have the time to sit there and write beautifully crafted emails. And thankfully, you don't have to. And that's where AI comes in. Now, the same with all the other tips I've mentioned, it's really important to note that just because you have an AI tool and a piece of kit that can write you an email, it doesn't mean you'll write emails that actually convert. Most people, again, are out there writing generic, bland emails that don't hit right because they're not targeted, they're not specific, they're not highly relevant to their audience. They're not crafted using proven frameworks that drives people to take action. So it doesn't matter if you write a daily email every single day, if you don't have a proven framework, and if you don't know what things to say in your email to get people to buy, you can send as many emails as you possibly want. You still won't get people buying. It's important to understand the framework, the strategy behind how to write high converting emails that gets your audience taking action to book in a call to buy your stuff. And unfortunately, let's be honest, I've had emails where I've read them and thought, you know what, this sounds like a load of crap. You've probably read it, I've probably read it. I've seen content when I read it and think, you know what, this is probably written by AI. And do you know what happens next? My mind instantly switches off because I know, again, it's written by AI. It sounds super generic, sounds bland. It doesn't really have what I like to call soul. So how can you write emails with AI that does save you time, but still has soul and is structured in a way to get your audience to take action? And that's exactly what I'm about to break down. Here we go. So here's how we can turn your podcast transcripts into high converting emails in minutes. Step number 1, take your podcast transcript and ask AI to rewrite it into short, engaging emails. It's important to note that you have to use the podcast transcript because it's going to speak and create content in your voice. And you can tell it to cater the email to be written in the way that you speak on the podcast episode. And it's important to do this because it means it won't come out with something super generic, but it'll be something that's catered to you based on how you speak on the actual podcast. Number 2, you want to use the PAS framework. Problem, agitate, solution. This is another copywriting framework that you can use to get your audience to take action. Same with ADA. This is a separate type of framework that you can use to, again, get your audience to take action. Now, problem is really starting with a relatable struggle your audience faces. Agitate, explain why the problem is keeping them stuck from achieving their desired outcomes and their goals. Solution, position your podcast episode or your offer as the fix. It's really that simple. And then finally, end with a call to action to book a call, grab a freebie, or check out your latest podcast episode. The entire point here is to have simple frameworks that you can use to turn your podcast content into a sales asset for your business. I can't stress this enough. You need to have complete clarity on who your audience are, what their pain points are, what they're going through, in order to give the AI the context it needs in order to generate emails that actually convert. And thankfully, because you have a topic-focused podcast, an educational podcast covering topics on the show, you're already talking about these things naturally on the podcast. So when you feed your podcast transcript to the AI, it has all the context it needs, and it can elaborate, it can contextualize some of the pain points that you might not have spoken about, and create, again, these high converting emails that sells your podcast, your products, your books, your services, that gets you book calls, and all of the above. So to recap, here are 4 ways to use AI to drive more growth and monetization for your podcast. Tip number 1, use AI to analyze your previously top performing episodes and create new content that drives more growth for your podcast. Tip number 2, turn your podcast transcripts into powerful show notes that actually converts, that turns more strangers into listeners. Number 3, repurpose your podcast content into a book and sell it on Amazon and to your podcast listenership. Number 4, write high converting emails that sells your offer and turns more of your listeners into high paying clients. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.